All right. We are back at the AAC Podcast, and today is going to be a great episode that Roy has picked out. We're going to talk about, did giants exist? And if they did, where did they come from? And what is going on? So, Roy, we're just going to go right into this really quick. Where did you hear about giants? What brought you to this topic? Because I know I got a lot to say on it, but you hit us off first, man. Like, what intrigues you about this topic?
So I was watching this podcast with these guys and they were talking about I think they found Solomon's tomb. And so there was the I haven't done a whole lot of research on it, but it made me go back to like because Solomon, he was a big guy. He was like, how tall was he? I think he was like close to like I don't know, like 7'9", something like
I
that.
don't know exactly. That's
Okay,
pretty tall.
but he was a big guy, right? He was supposed to be this like huge person.
You talking about Solomon in the Bible?
Like King
Yeah.
Solomon.
I don't remember him being that tall, but I know it talks about him being tall. I don't know the exact height.
Okay.
It said he's everyone else's head came up to his shoulders. I remember it saying that he was handsome and like he was taller than most people.
Okay. Anyways, it just made me think about giants and what's going on. Anyways, with that being said, they were saying how his tomb was found and that I think it's in like the Dead Sea. And as soon as someone, put out or getting the request to go and do some research, do some digging further down into the Dead Sea, that the very next month, the U.S. invaded Iraq.
Mm-hmm. I've been down that rabbit hole a little bit.
Have you?
Yes. Yep. Why the Middle East? Why people and the governments get involved to go cover some stuff up?
Yeah. So it just so happens that just happens a month later, but we were saying that we're after some oil. But yeah, and then so that kind of got my head rolling about, do giants actually exist? And I know you and I have had conversations about this, and I've been very intrigued by this, but I'm not the person to speak to. I haven't done the research. You have done the research, so I'm fascinated to kind of get your pick on this, and then Alex too. Apparently, Alex, you're into this as well.
We both are.
Yeah, I think what you said is interesting. I think there's been a lot of like cover-ups, especially in the Middle East, that I've seen. I've seen a lot of stories of why places, will get bombed or why they're going in, and it's not like obviously officially verified. But I think the question I want to ask you first, Roy, before me and Alex go on a monologue together, because we'll probably just go into some deep ends, is if giants did exist, and if do you believe they did first?
I don't know, man.
So you're 50-50, 60-40, 80-20. What are you?
I'm a 30-70.
Okay, so that they most likely didn't.
Yeah.
But you have some faith or hope that some weird thing could happen.
Yeah, yeah. There's some.
Okay, 30-70. So if they did, where did they come from in your mind? Before we get crazy here, how did they? What do you think? Or you have no idea? Like, what's your answer?
I have no clue. I mean, I'm leaving this to you guys
here
because
no guessing.
I'm intrigued about this. I want to talk to you. For the ones that have
we'll go into it, but I want to hear
your
guess before me and Alex go into this whole monologue of where we think they came from. Everything. Take your best. I would love to hear where your best guess is that you think they came from before we give you our thoughts on it. Nothing.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking like they were here before, then all of a sudden like we all somehow hung out, and then there was a great flood.
There's definitely hanging out. That definitely happened.
A little too much. A little too much of that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? We'll just kind of like dive into it of my thoughts, and then Alex, you can hit it up. But so I definitely think giants did exist, and I guess the first thing is, what is a giant, right? Is it a certain height? Is it a type of a creature? Like what, when you hear that word, like how do you define that? I think is one thing, right? Like, because there's a lot of tall people, right? And here's what's interesting. In my family, there's somebody who's over 8 feet. I think he was 8 feet 4 inches. And he was like a great uncle or something. Like my grandpa would tell me about how this guy or somebody in my mom said there was somebody that's over 8 feet, right? Around that. That's pretty crazy. So like just that is kind of like a giant in a sense. But like, what do you think, Alex? Like what would you define a giant?
Giant would have to be something outside of the realm of like human genetic potential.
Okay, so we're just gonna go straight into it. I like it. So basically, the Nephilim.
I mean, they're tall people. It's not a guarantee they have like Nephilim DNA, but
So
otherwise, my roommate might have
your
some.
definition is a giant is actually referred to a Nephilim, which is a half breed, in a sense.
Yes.
Okay, you ready to go crazy, Roy boy?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I asked ChatGPT, did giants ever exist? And it says the idea of giants has been a part of folklore, mythology, and religion for centuries, but there is no scientific evidence to support the existence of giants, humanoids, as described in these stories. And it just listed off of mythology, folklore, gigantism humans, and then anyways. So ChatGPT couldn't tell me anything.
Yeah, so I'll give you like the 30,000 high foot view of my belief on it, and then I'll let Alex hit it, and then we'll just kind of get your response. So, basically, when I hear giants, I think of the word Nephilim, and there's basically how you describe a Nephilim is. Have you ever heard of the Watchers, Roy, out of the Book of Enoch, by chance? The terminology.
No, but I've seen.
Okay. So just imagine, you've seen the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, what, Noah? You talking about Noah?
Oh, yeah. With Russell Crowe?
No, The Watchers.
Oh, I don't know what that movie is.
Guys, it's a superhero movie.
Oh wait,
that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, yeah, so
not DC Comics, not that one.
I'll give you a good analogy. So like I love Lord of the Rings, right? And so there's like elves and there's wizards and all this stuff, right? There's Watchers of Middle Earth. Okay, so I think the term Watchers is more referred to as there's a higher entity, we'll call it like an angel, that was put in a position to watch, govern, like protect around Earth, Middle Earth, right? That would be us, Earth.
Okay.
And so in the Book of Enoch, it talks about how they fell and they came and they basically had sexual relationship with humans, women, and they bartered and they taught us humans how to pharmacia, mascara, like weapons. They taught us a whole bunch of things, okay, like of knowledge, right? And they traded it. And there's actually a very interesting and deep dive into that I just heard recently, actually on Blurry Creatures, which is a great podcast to go listen to. They have really good stuff on a lot of these crazy topics, bringing people on. But so the giants or the Nephilim came from basically kind of like we call them like half breeds, and that was what you'd be calling like a Hercules, right? That's kind of what you would call like these mythical creatures that are in society, and we look at them as like folklore or lore, but that's what those are in there. They're like a half breed, right? And so that's how I look at what to define a giant and where they would come from. So I'll let Alex hit it up. He probably can say it in a more terminology than me.
I do agree, and I'm actually in the middle of still reading The Unseen Realm by Dr. Michael Heiser. So Roy, if you want to know more, and anyone watching wants to know more, the biblical or the ancient languages scholar Dr. Michael Heiser is a great source for all of this. Yes, I also believe that from the both geological, like historical perspective, and the theological perspective, giants that exist. It says in Genesis 6, and then the extra biblical text of the Book of Enoch, it says that the Watchers, the supernatural beings that were appointed to the nations by God, eventually rebelled against God. They chose to have a lineage. They wanted like a family line for their own. So they took human wives, and their offspring were then called the giants. They're called Nephilim in Genesis chapter 6. And leading up to the flood of Noah is that time where they're kind of given free reign. And there's a whole bunch of stories and myths that I think are based off of that. So it's kind of universal across every culture. Like pick your mythology, pick your nation. They have some sort of history with giants, whether it's like Japan or ancient Greece or the Nordic traditions, like the ancient Norse gods and the giants. There's a lot of similarities that I think you'll find between the Book of Enoch and ancient Greek mythology, because throughout the generations of giants, they got smaller, and it actually gives the sizes of the giants in the Book of Enoch, and they're actually very similar to how ancient Greek sources of their mythology describe the size of the giants, and then they got smaller. That went from the Titans to the giants to giants, Titans, then Olympian gods. And Olympian gods are like almost human in their height. They're like just a little bit taller. And it actually gives the same like lineage in the Book of Enoch, like the same size difference throughout the generations. So I think the Bible and the Book of Enoch kind of give what I think is the truth about giants, and every other culture usually pushes you to worship them in some way, when the Book of Enoch and the Bible is telling you not to. It's like, these are the offspring of demons and humans, like do not worship them. So that's where I think that came from. I think that's where the truth is about them. As far as like what you're reading about ChatGPT and how there's no evidence for them, I think that's questionable. There is the evidence with all the literature throughout, history of people seeing these things. There's cave paintings, there's, stone carvings and stories to be passed down in every culture. And also, this is another point that I got from Michael Heiser. It was one of his videos on, he's answering this question essentially, like, why don't we have more evidence of these giants existing? Like, we have skeletons of people, why don't we have skeletons of giants? And the answer is actually kind of simple, and it was really interesting. We don't have that many skeletons of people that survive. We actually decompose a lot very quickly. Skeletons surviving is pretty rare. Bones break down over the course of like a couple hundred years, and there's nothing left. And fossilization is really rare, and it pretty much never happens with humans. And we found in the area of Israel where all these stories take place in the Bible, less than 300 intact skeletons of humans. And we know the population of those cities would be a couple of million total, of the whole area, with all that people around Israel and the country surrounding it, like Syria and Babylon and stuff. So if you take the ratio of how many people were reported to live there versus how many skeletons were found, that creates a ratio that's very, very, very low. Almost no one who is found. The remains are found. And if you take the number of giants that are reported in the Bible, a couple of clans that are named in the Old Testament, like the Rephaim and the Amalekites, and all the tribes that are in the Old Testament, and you actually use that same ratio, it goes down to below 1. So it makes mathematical sense for you to not find their skeletons, because there's not enough of them to leave a trace, essentially. And I think that gives you realistic expectations for how many you should find. And personally, I think there have been more that have been found, but the skeletons just happen to disappear when someone finds them, things like that. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I think that part right there too is and we can get into that later, is I think it destroys the narrative, right?
Yeah.
Just imagine, not even if it's not real, but just say if they find one giant bone, it breaks the narrative of what reality they're trying to spew down us on mainstream media, the governments, the powers to be. And so I think they do a very good job at hiding the truth. And I think that's part of the issue, is they say they're trying to be truth seekers in the mainstream media or the government, but I don't believe them at all, like at all. And so that's where my red flags go up. I'm like, well, I don't know. There's like, it could be there. So I think that's like a whole other rabbit hole I don't want to go down, but I think you hit the nail on the head there, Alex, with that. And this is also, and then I'll get your response, Roy. This is actually what, like, I never made sense of the flood with the Noah story. Even as a kid, I was like, that makes no sense. I was like, could we be that corrupt? And like, he's like, you know what? He's like, I'm killing you all. I was like, well, okay. I mean, I know we're sinners, but I was like, dang, we were really bad. And then I heard about the giants and the Nephilim and how, like, someone's like, oh no, God needed to wipe out the bloodlines, like, because they got corrupted. And I was like, that actually makes more sense now. And so I was like, I remember when I first heard it, I didn't believe it though. I was like, it makes more sense, but I'm like, I can't go there. That's too crazy. Angels having sex with humans. Like, what in the world, like, sci-fi movie is this? And the more I like looked into it, I was like, this actually makes more sense than God just like, oh, I'm just killing everybody. Cause like, why were they corrupt? And so I think that's another part that gets left out a lot in like Christianity or churches or Bible time story is like, well, that's a crazy story. How does God just wipe out everybody except one family?
And the reason for him choosing Noah in the Old Testament, it says directly he was perfect in his generations. That's the language they use in English, or genealogy is another word you could use. Like, there's something about his lineage that was considered perfect, which means like it wasn't corrupted.
So then are we all connected to Noah then?
I would assume so. I mean, I'm not a person that's like someone. I watched this video and they're like, could anybody have, like, lasted outside of the ark? And this guy's like, absolutely not. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, every time I go down this crazy, like, I'll call it the blurry verse, and I'm learning about all this weird stuff, I'm like, anything's possible. I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm like, I wouldn't be shocked.
It does say that it wiped out the whole earth, and personally I think it was a global flood. But another argument by Dr. Michael Heiser is he believed in a local flood of Europe, like most of Asia and North Africa, because the word that they use for wiping out the whole earth, like that word, the whole earth, he went back to the original language in Hebrew, and he went to somewhere else in the Bible and they used that same word, but it didn't mean the entire world. It meant like everything you knew about in a region. So it's actually, possible to some scholars to believe that it wasn't completely global, but I believe it was.
And then here, this is the last thing I'll say, and then I want to get your thoughts, Roy. So I can't remember who said this, but I was listening to it on a podcast, and he said it in an interesting way that really got me thinking about this topic. Satan, he wanted to corrupt the bloodline, and he got his generals, like high-end and demons, we'll call them, right, to like the Watchers that fell, and infiltrated and made babies and made these hybrids, and it corrupted the bloodline because we are created in the image of God, and we have authority and dominion over earth because of who we are. You don't have to believe in God to be created in his image and have authority and dominion. And so he wants to take it back. Okay. And so if he taints the bloodline and you become not human, you lose your authority and dominion because you are not a human anymore. And so this is pure theory, obviously, but this guy was talking about how that was why he thinks that Satan tried to go do this, because I do believe that, like, I think Satan knew at some point, like, I don't think he actually went and did this. I think he got his minions to go do this because I think he knew there's going to be repercussions by doing something like this. And so that's kind of my like, I heard this theory and I'm kind of on board with it right now. Like, I think that's kind of how it went down, to a sense, but yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Okay.
That's all you got?
Dude, when you said let's talk about giants, I'm like, dude, Roy has no idea. He has
I have
idea
no
where
clue.
the conversation's going.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking like, what would life be like today if we still had giants with us?
Dude, they're underground, man. They're coming up. They're gonna pop up.
They're gonna pop up. They just been hanging out on this underground society this whole time.
I don't know, man. Like I don't know.
Alex is turning red over here.
There's just the lighting, I promise. I forgot what I was going to say for a second. I do think that you're right, Jaron. Like Satan, to a sense, I think he knew what he's doing, but also I think there are multiple rebellious entities, and the kingdom of darkness isn't all unified. And these may have just been other entities that also decided to rebel, and they kind of ended up on the same side against God. And now, because of that, they happen to be associated with demonic entities. And also, as far as the flood goes, there are a lot of reasons why. And I think a big one is the prophecy in Genesis 3, where it's the messianic prophecy. God says that essentially the Savior is going to come through the line of Eve, and the line of Eve, the generations of human beings afterwards were being so corrupted that he was like running out of people that he could bring that Messiah through in the right lineage that's not corrupted by Watcher DNA. So he had to take care of all of the other corruptions in the DNA so that he could continue and create the lineage where Jesus would eventually come through, or otherwise,
dude, there's a great
Nephilim.
book, The Chronicle Brothers, that I read, and you follow Michael, Gabriel, and Lucifer around, and it talks about this exact thing, like from a theory standpoint of what this lady Wendy Alec thinks, and exactly what you just said.
Trilogy.
No, it's called The Chronicle Brothers by Wendy Alec, and she literally breaks down that where like you're following Lucifer around, and he's trying to corrupt the bloodlines. And there's these other angels, like Gabriel and Michael, are like, there's like nobody left. Like, and the reason is because what you just said, God has to come down through to be a human to correct what was done wrong with Adam. He has to. He can't do it. He has to come through the human to sacrifice himself, and Satan doesn't know the whole thing, what was going on, but he knows that is going on, and he's trying to like end the line, and he's trying to wreck it. The way that the book portrays it, it's like, it's very interesting.
Okay, it's interesting.
So anyway, sorry, Roy, we cut you off a few times.
No, it's okay. Well, I was going to say, we got to get this guy Michael Heiser on here. We're going to have this conversation.
He passed away.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Sadly.
He's got some good stuff.
He's got a lot of content on YouTube, though. A lot of podcasts, a lot of videos.
Yeah.
And a lot of books.
So after that all craziness, what do you think, Roy?
I mean,
it's a lot to take in for not hearing it.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts are, I mean, so I think there has been reports of like, bones being discovered, because you were mentioning how if bones were discovered, they would dismantle the whole thing. I mean, I'm over here looking online for it, and there's even a National Geographic, history video on, says giant remains found in Minnesota, where you're at.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Jaron.
That's right.
You've been holding out on us this whole time.
In my backyard.
Yeah, right there.
Jaron's been collecting them. It's him. It's not the Smithsonian. It's him.
Yeah.
So no, but I think we just got so just desensitized to the whole thing. We're just like, well, whatever. Aliens are real. Giants are real. I think everyone's like, just, like bring them on. Like that's kind of going back to our whole conversation of being desensitized. Like I just think there's discovery about it, but people just don't care anymore. I mean, I think we're just so overwhelmed and just so over stimulated that we're just like, okay, well, what else is new?
Do you remember The Matrix, right? In the movie where the black cat goes by and he goes deja vu?
Yeah.
You remember that scene?
I do.
I feel like that's what the mainstream media, the government, the people in power, they do is they set the pace, they set the tone, they set the narrative, they set the story. And then all of a sudden you run into like, oh my gosh, somebody actually found like a bone that looks like a giant. And that's like the black cat going by. Like, that's like the deja vu. And so now they ask like, well, what does that mean? And they're like, oh, they got to readjust something, right? Because the cat goes by. So like they're changing, like they covered up the windows with walls, right? And so like when something of like that breaks their narrative comes out, they got to change it up and they got to shake it all up because like say for instance, like think of these things. They seem insane, giants, right? Okay. And then like I'm not a flat earther. I think it's an interesting thing, but I'm just going to use it as an example. If the earth was actually flat, it would just shatter the entire narrative of everything, right? Like it would be insane. Like it would make no sense, okay? I don't think it's how they tell us though. I really don't. NASA's just full of crap. Like there's so many weird edits and things that you can see when they're in the space station and glitches and like I don't think they're telling us the real story. What it is exactly, I don't know. But like there's so many little things like this that are not little that if they actually came out, it would just shatter everything. And I don't think our brains could almost handle it for most people because we live in like a matrix, in like a bubble, and then we're comfortable and we have a system. And I think the people in power, if they go, oh my gosh, like if these people actually knew what was going on, all hell would break loose. Like we'd freak out. Like just imagine if tomorrow they captured an actual giant and it wasn't AI and it wasn't this and they just decided to tell everybody. I don't think 90% of the people would believe it, even if it was real. I really don't.
A lot of people are convinced that whatever they see on the news is like always true. So if they see something too far away from it, they're like, oh, that can't be true. They're still being controlled. But I was going to say the Nephilim and giants and how people currently view that kind of stuff, that's changing very quickly. And I think a lot of people are becoming more and more interested in this, and not just like the Christians the specific sect of Christians who actually believe the Book of Enoch and like the giants in Genesis 6 and stuff, but people outside of the church this is like one of the subjects that's waking people up is alternate history and giants, and like how there's kind of proof that they existed and which group is saying the truth about where they came from. And I think it's actually like a really important to know that, because if you talk to somebody who's like curious about what giants are, that's actually a way to lead them to the truth. Like one of the ways that people are getting woken up is what the Nephilim were, and that can actually lead them to the gospel stories, because one of the many reasons why Jesus had to redeem what he did is because of the corruption of partially the Nephilim as well. The fall, like Genesis 3, but also Genesis 6.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's a big subject. And if you look at videos on what people are doing about the Nephilim, and like just says who are the Nephilim on like a title of a video, like things are just blowing up constantly because people are just interested in this, because they're desiring to know what's true, because so many people are aware that they're not being told the truth, that like the history that they were given in high school was like plastic, manicured, and filtered for whatever the narrative was supposed to be at that time. And they're kind of realizing that's fake, and now they want to find out all this truth about it. So I think it's really important to actually know this.
To what extent, when you say it's really important for us to really know this, like
know the story, the origin story, Genesis 6, basic stuff, not like going crazy and going down every rabbit hole, but to have answers to these questions. Like
I got something on that. I think we were just talking about this yesterday. As my father-in-law, he preached at a local church here, and afterwards we were sitting around talking, and it was about the good news, the good news of the kingdom. And we were talking, and I was like, I don't think most people know the story of what really happened. Like what is God's story through the Bible, and what is Jesus's story, and why did he actually come?
Mhm.
Like I've had a conversation with a few people, and they're like, why would a God come and die for me? Why does he need to do that? Like, that makes no sense. And I remember kind of being there at some point, like, yeah, what the heck? Why is this guy gotta die for me? Like, what did I do? I didn't do anything wrong. Like, that's what I'd be thinking, right? Like, and then it's like, because we inherited the fall, and God had to send his son to come clean it up, right? And this is the whole bloodline, what we talked about a little bit earlier. But if you don't know the narrative and the story, and I think this is why a lot of this gets covered up, and is because if you start looking into these things, you'll actually get curious, and you'll start what you just said, Alex. You'll be like, oh, well, if this could be true, then what's over here? And I don't think and I'll just say the enemy, like, he doesn't want you to do that. And so, and I think that's why the mainstream media is controlled. I think the narrative is controlled is because if you actually like start taking the veil off of your eyes and you start seeing what's going on, like, it's a whole different ball game being played. And I think that's, it's like scary, but beautiful at the same time.
Mhm. Now, so for me, you know, we've talked about this before. Like, if you had the choice, would you want to know? And there's a lot of people out there that just like, I don't want to know. Just let me just kind of like, let me take the blue pill. And then there's people that are like you, like us, where we're just like, we kind of just want to know. We want to know, like, wow, at what age would you say is the best way to introduce this side to someone that's brand new, kind of coming into this? Or I mean, at what stage would you introduce this to a person about this topic, about what's what's out there, what's being covered, what's not being covered?
I mean, I'll go for it.
It kind of depends on where they're at already. So just kind of ask them what they believe about the historical narrative. Like, did we, like, Darwinism straight, evolution for billions of years, or like, are we been lied to at all? Do they completely believe every source they've ever been given in school? Or, I mean, you could just start there, be like, are we completely told the truth about our history? And what do you think about all these, you could call them alternate history ideas, like ancient civilizations before what are reported to be the civilizations that we think of now as the first ones. So like the ancient Egyptians and the technology they had, and what the Bible says about.
Yeah, man, the pyramids make no sense.
See, like, stick Jaron on them, like
zero sense.
Yeah, just talk to them about like how much of the historical narrative they believe, and then tell them or ask them what they believe about like all these stories and mythologies, like all the things that line up, like the universal flood story that's in every mythology, like that wipes out most of the earth, and then humanity kind of restarts. Like, to ask them what they believe about that, and just kind of start from there.
I think for me too is like I talk about all this stuff with all my kids since they were like 5 or 6. Like, it's a pretty normal conversation, this stuff around our household. Mm-hmm. But if I'm going to talk to a person, I don't drop this subject on them like straight up. Like, it's kind of like it's a lot to take in, and like I would say I actually feel like I can have this conversation with non-Christians than I can Christians a lot of the times.
That's true.
Like most people, because it kind of breaks the regular churchgoer narrative, which is weird because like I don't really know 100%, but I'm like, hey, like there's some stuff here going on. Like, we got to look at it, and to like ignore. It's like you can't just ignore Genesis 6. Like, it literally just says like there's something going on. It's like, I don't know the answers, but I'm like, there's something happening right here. Like, you can't just ignore it.
So which brings me to the reason why I asked this question is because if these pastors and preachers are so about, preaching the word from the book, like, like I've gone years at a church where this has not been talked about at all. Like it is it just skipped over. So what is it going to take? Is it, I mean, is it even going to take that where they're just kind of like hoarding in the knowledge, but they know as soon as they start mentioning this, like all chaos is going to break loose. They're going to lose their job at the church, and then they're like, it's like witchcraft. Like this person's preaching blasphemy. So like it has to be. I mean, it's the preacher's job to be able to mentor and guide his flock. Is it also the preacher's job to also hide the evil?
Not hide the truth.
Yeah. Like I like this is at the end of the day, red letters are more important than red pilling people. Do you know what I mean by that, Roy?
No.
Red letters in the Bible is when Jesus is talking. Red pill is like all this like fun stuff to talk about. And so like from a church perspective, like a pastor, what you talked about, like, you know, a lot of people aren't ready to have these kind of conversations because what you said earlier, the narrative and what you've been taught, it's so ingrained. And so like, even I was sharing, like the first time I heard stuff like this, I was like, what kind of drugs are you guys on? This is like 3-4 years ago. I was like, you guys are nuts. And then like, I started getting into it. I started talking about it. And it's just like normal talk for me now, all these, cause it's not that I'm saying like, I know 100% these things. It's more of like, no, something happened in our history that we are not told about. And for some reason we are not like talking about it. And when we talk about it, if you talk about it in the Christian community, it's like, whoa, we don't go there. Like that's just like off limits a lot of the time, or like, you're just a nut job. If you talk about in the secular world, they're like, yeah, you're a nut job. Like that's a fairy tale. That's magic. Like that's not real. And so what I've run into is I'm like, you know, there's a lot of verses in the Bible, like like they just don't preach on. Right. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to preach on them, but like, if you go in and start reading these things, you're like, there's a history that we're just not told and taught about. So I don't know if you got anything on that, Alex, but that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I know a lot of people in general just don't want to talk about things that make them uncomfortable. And that kind of extends sadly to most Christians, even though it shouldn't. And things like giants make them uncomfortable. They're not going to talk about it because they don't want to accept the fact that that stuff is real. There's a lot of Christians who are believers in the supernatural resurrection of Jesus on the third day, but they shun away anything else supernatural because it's kind of like, it's weird. It makes them uncomfortable.
I know a lot of those people, which is crazy because like, if you can rise from the dead, man, anything else is fair game.
Yeah, that should be like the most extreme, and the giants should be like less extreme than that. You raise from the dead. Like, dude, why can't you believe that?
Have you had this conversation? Oh, have either of you had these type of conversations with people of the Jewish faith of the I mean
Jews, the Jews.
You mean You mean the Jews?
The Jews, yes.
I mean, I've talked to a few, but not like where they're hardcore into the Jewish faith, but they're Jewish, but they're not like actively living it.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
I haven't met a whole lot of Orthodox Jews or anything.
I'm just curious, like if you've had that conversation, what that conversation would be like from their upbringing and perspective. That's what I'm curious about. Yeah. Well, guys, does this sway me? I'm not sure. I don't think I'm really 100% sold, but I think it's definitely, to me, it's more entertaining than it is scary, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. You're nothing to be afraid of. You know, Jesus is still king. Like, I'm not.
Yeah.
No one's afraid of the Nephilim. No one's preaching fear.
Yeah.
Until they start coming out of the ground. I'm sorry. Couldn't help myself.
It'd be like, I can see Jaron. I knew it.
No. There's a whole lot of other stuff, but I'm being funny, but I'm not. I mean, let's just go there for a second. Like, in Revelation, I mean, it talks about, it's going to be like the days of Noah, right? Like the end times.
Jesus did say that, yeah.
So, like, what the heck does that mean? What was going on during Noah's time? Well, if what we just talked about was going on, like, I don't know, like, is it too far-fetched to think it's going to get a little weird? I don't think that we're actually ready to, like, fully grasp what's going to happen in Revelation. And that's another thing is, like, who the heck actually really knows? Like to put it in a box is pretty crazy. Like, we were talking about this yesterday too, of like the whole Left Behind. You ever watch Left Behind, Roy or Alex?
I haven't seen it, but I know about it.
Dude, okay.
Isn't that with what's his name from, like, he's a part of this TV
Nicolas
show?
Cage, I think, played the
Wait,
guy.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. I've seen a
Nicholas-
different. There's a different version, but I haven't seen
Nicholas. No, what did Nicolas Cage play? I swear he played in the Left Behind movie. Hold on.
There was a movie.
Yes, he is.
Scrolling through it. Yes,
in 2014, he played Left Behind. Wait, that seems. It was only that long ago? 10 years? What? Crazy. Oh, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name right now. No, okay, get this theory. So my brother-in-law said this, and this would be you'll appreciate this one, Alex. So, like, like the rapture theory, Roy, do you know that at all?
A little bit,
yeah. Sucked up. All right. Well, anyways, we'll just do it like kind of funny style. But basically, like, there's just, I don't know. There's like post-trib, pre-trib. I don't even know what the heck those mean, basically. But basically, there's like a theory, like, you get kind of like warped up to heaven and you like leave before like the hard times come. Right? You get like sucked up in the rapture, right? Mm-hmm. Well, my brother-in-law was like, hey, he just said this and it like blew my mind. He's like, what if we get sucked up and Jesus comes back to do his 1,000-year reign and you get sucked up and he's like, peace out, guys, I'm going to Earth. And you guys are stuck up here for 1,000 years without me.
That's like the worst version of Revelation possible.
Dude, isn't that funny though, Alex?
Yeah, it's like, I get to see Jesus like, oh, he's gone.
Be like, oh yeah, he got sucked up, and be like, peace out, I'm going back.
Oh my gosh. That was your brother?
That was my brother-in-law. It was so funny. We were just talking about how, like, I mean, who knows, right? Who really knows? But yeah. Mm-hmm. Crazy stuff, Roy. When you ask us questions like this, me and Alex are gonna go off the deep end, man.
I'm observing and I'm like enjoying this, I'm having fun here.
Dude, I kept this pretty PG. I didn't want to get too crazy on this one. Like, I could have gone pretty deep on some stuff, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that yet, but
right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's for the best. Introduce them slowly.
We'll start there, but I think at the end of the day, I'd love to hear your thought on the craziness. Not try to persuade you or anything. That's not what we're trying to do at all. But like, when you hear something this outlandish, like, what does it actually make you think though? Like,
what does it actually make me think?
Yeah, like, I know you've not really heard stuff like where, like, this whole thought process, like, does it does it have you like, what in the world, or like, that's just crazy?
No, I mean, I think it still goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, that I just feel like there's just so many things that are out there. I mean, you actually put it a great way, like, if you believe in God rose from the dead, and like, okay, there's other things that are possible that are out there. And I'm just like now just in this position of sitting and waiting and seeing what comes about, and kind of like putting the pieces together, just like how Solomon's tomb was found, and then the U.S. attacked Iraq, and then learning about the book of Saul, Samuel, and then hearing about the covenant, and just going, people like, covenant being taken and covenant given back, and then I'm just thinking, like, are we going in and attacking, almost like getting the covenant ourselves now, and just seeing the repercussions of it.
You got any thoughts on that, Alex? He's talking about the Ark of the Covenant is what he's talking about.
Could you say that again?
Samuel.
Could you say that again, Roy?
So, I was reading the book of I can't remember. Samuel.
First Samuel.
And how there's bloody war between the Israelites and the Palestinians. Palestinians take the Ark of the or Palestinians.
No, we're gonna keep it Palestinians.
Anyway, hey, this guy's studying as much as he can.
No. I mispronounce things so much. It's so refreshing that someone else does it outside of me. I'm laughing with you, Roy.
So I'm just trying to recall. I don't recall that well.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Ark of the Covenant was stolen, and then they give it back because of all the bad things that are happened because they stole.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and now I'm like, are we going there? Are we kind of still in the ark of something, and then we're seeing the repercussions of it from that?
Do you mean America, or what do you?
Yeah,
you mean like Christians, or what do you mean?
America.
I don't know if I've heard that before. Like you think we're
there's a theory out there,
like the Palestinians or the Philistines, when they took the ark and it was in the temple and the statue of Dagon was next to it and then it kept falling over. Is that the story?
It's part of it, yeah.
I think I've heard preaching on this before. I think when God's presence enters a person or a temple, you could say, it starts knocking over idols. They were preaching from that, saying like when you put God next to something in your heart, like it'll agitate other things to like get you to get rid of the idol. So that I know I've heard that individually, like within a person, but I think that actually is possible when like you implant, like a church goes into a culture, like someone plants a church in a very dark area and other idols around it start falling down, proverbially, or, maybe literally sometimes because it did happen in the Old Testament. But yeah, like the Spirit of God will agitate demons. It will agitate evil and make it uncomfortable and kind of like come up to the surface. So I think there is something to that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
I think that's why there's a shakening happening. And there's
the shakening.
Sean Connery.
I'm gonna have to write that down. It's one of your best quotes.
There we go.
Sorry,
well,
I'm hungry now.
Yeah, you're hungry. Well, I think that's probably a good wrap up, huh? Roy, you just keep coming up with these great topics last minute. I really enjoyed this one, but we got a lot we can go down on this. It's very interesting. I love chatting about it because it's actually, I think intriguing to keep going down different theories or what's out there, and also just like looking at history and then looking at different verses in the Bible that reference things that don't really get talked about like on a regular church basis that no one ever touches. So it's been fun.
It's been fun, guys.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Peace out, everybody.
See you.
And now we get the